Hey everybody, my name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog, a video games review podcast where I bring in guests to talk about the games we play. My guest today is a friend of the show, co-host of the Super Bracket Bros podcast, and proud head crab farmer, Jay Davis. Hey, dude.
Hey, Dave. How's it going, man? I'm excited to be on today's episode, and I do appreciate Head Crab Farmer is one of the more impressive titles I've held in my life, so that's a good one.
That's nothing to be scoffed at, for sure. It's a tough line of work right there.
Yeah, I knew some guys, it's kind of 50-50. You could come back some days, it's tougher than coal mining, some might say. We get it done out in the fields, and it's for the good of humanity. For some reason, we're legally obligated to only bring crowbars to our place of work.
Yeah, it's odd. That must be one of those old laws that survives from like the 1800s for some reason. No one ever thought to replace it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, because I see these new guys out here, they're running around with gravity guns and saw blades. And I think we just sort of got grandfathered in having to use the crowbars. And, I'm working with the union on it. But I'll keep you posted as we maybe we can do a follow-up episode about the the state of head crab farming.
Exactly. Yeah. Once a year we get together for the state of head crab farming 2022, 2023 and so on. So as Jay alluded to there, today we're going to be talking about Half-Life 2, which is a first-person shooter developed and published by Valve in 2004. And a quick elevator pitch for Half-Life 2, if you're not familiar, I would say that this is the OG, one of the OG modern first-person shooters. If you've played a first-person shooter since 2004, there's a good chance that Half-Life 2 was extremely influential in it. So there's my elevator pitch. If you're not super familiar with it, also a big focus on physics-based puzzles and stuff like that, which again, we'll get into that as we go. But before we get into Half-Life 2, I want to talk about Super Bracket Bros because it was one of the podcasts when I found, connecting with people on Instagram and seeing what type of podcasts people are doing. Super Bracket Bros was one of those where I was like, God damn it, Dave, why did you not think of this for a podcast idea? So, Jay, why don't you go ahead and explain what Super Bracket Bros is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Super Bracket Bros, me and my co-host Eli, we try to do the same thing you do. We try to bring guests on every single week. But what we do is each season is a tournament, and it's a tournament between fictional characters. And each episode is a fight in that tournament. So we have seasons. They're about 32 episodes long because we have 32 fighters. And we just go episode by episode, match by match, talk about these characters, talk about why they're great, talk about, epic moments they had, what is cool about them, how we discovered them, how our guests discovered them, why they love them, all of that great stuff. And then we talk about who would win in a fight, which is just the fun part. It's just we can create go into the theater of the mind and really explore sometimes it's the dumbest things possible, and sometimes it's the coolest things possible. Dave, for example, was on Archer from Archer, super spy extraordinaire going up against an actual super spy in Black Widow from the MCU, right. And that was a great time. That's Super Bracket Bros in a nutshell. But it's we're very focused on having a good time and exploring cool characters. We're not going to be one of those, we're not going to be one of those podcasts that talks about the numbers or bullet velocity or, we don't really go into that stuff. So if you're looking for a technical argument show, that's not really what you're looking for, but it's funny, and we try to be as, we try to be wholesome. We try to enjoy ourselves. But that's Super Bracket Bros. And it's always enjoyable to hear when people are jealous of our show concepts. So thank you, Dave.
Yeah, it's the thing. Me and my friends, I have my other show, a Top 3 podcast, and we've been doing lists with each other for decades at this point. But the other thing we've been doing this whole time was who would win in a fight. And when I saw Super Bracket Bros, I was like, fuck, yes, of course. It's should be a podcast. Of course, it's great. And just one other thing I want people to know about Super Bracket Bros that I really like is that, so you're bound to get lots of characters on the show that people are not super familiar with. Like when we talked about Archer versus Black Widow, those are two that, a lot of people have a base familiarity with both of those characters. But throughout your seasons, you have a lot of characters that I have no idea who they are. But what I really like is part of each episode is dedicated to like digging into that character's backstory, what their powers are, if they have powers, what are their abilities, what makes them a formidable opponent in this fight. And so like I really like that kind of like base explanation at the beginning of each episode, and then getting into the fight itself is also really entertaining too. So very good show. I really recommend everyone check out Super Bracket Bros.
Yeah, no, I mean, just like you, me and Eli, we've been having these discussions forever, and, we decided to throw it in front of a microphone. The origin of every podcast ever, we thought we were hilarious, and, we decided to put a microphone in front of it. But yeah, and I think one of the best parts about it has been getting to connect with people like you, with guests and people that love these characters and can bring an extra dynamic to it. So, but yeah, no, we would anybody listening, we would love for you to come out and check out Super Bracket Bros and yeah, and I mean, have your voice heard as well. We definitely take it into consideration, with every fight, we put out listener polls and stuff like that. So yeah, no, we'd love to have you.
It's really good. Right now, you guys are doing a season that is focused on kind of like firearms experts. Is that right?
Correct.
Like Black Widow and Archer and people who know their way around a gun of some kind.
Exactly. Some way, shape, or form. Obviously, Dave was on the first episode of our season when we talked about Archer, Black Widow. We recently released an episode where we talked about John Wick. John Wick is basically the synopsis of the kind of character that we're looking for. Gun fu, I would say, is the sort of thing that we're looking for. And so we also have characters like a lot of first person shooter characters. So like Gordon Freeman was a character we considered. We ended up going with Alex Vance actually as a character in this tournament. And thankfully I had the opportunity to play Half-Life Alex, and so was able to bring that dynamic into the tournament and really, because like you said, so many people know about Half-Life and a lot of people have played Half-Life, but VR is still fairly inaccessible. It's a pretty high price point. And so thankfully I don't have a Steam headset, but I do know someone who does, able to borrow it for the weekend and actually play it and then bring that into podcast and be like, this is really cool. I kind of think this is the future of gaming. It's so cool, and able to, bring that to the forefront. Or back in season 1, talk about a character from a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, The Adventure Zone. Like we, both sides of the spectrum. We want to bring it from every possible corner of the multiverse.
Right. So yeah, every episode is not just like literally, Batman versus Superman or something like that. You really get a wide range of characters on the show, and it makes it a really enjoyable thing to think about yourself, when you really do get into a little bit of like the details of who has these abilities, how do they match up with the other person's abilities. But yeah, and really fun to listen to, of course. So once again, everyone, please check out Super Bracket Bros. You'll find information down in the show notes for where to find it. But, good podcast. You can find it anywhere you look. Speaking of Alex Vance, let's get into Half-Life 2. So we begin each episode with giving our kind of histories with Half-Life. We can do histories with the series in general, and then specifically, of course, Half-Life 2, which will be the focus of this episode. So Jay, the guest, always goes first. When did you first play Half-Life 2? Did you play Half-Life 1? And kind of what made you interested in this series?
So I have occasionally played Half-Life 1, but I was born in 1995. So Half-Life 1 wasn't really a game that I had access to. I barely had access to Half-Life 2. Thankfully, my dad was a fan of the series. And so when it came out in 2004, I would have been 10 years old. And I think that's when I played Half-Life 2. I was definitely a little young to be playing Half-Life 2, especially certain sections of the game that we will inevitably get into. I'm looking at you, Ravenholm. But it was still like it's been ingrained in me since I was young. It was a very formative shooter, and like the story is it comes and goes, but and you get a little bit of lore here and there. But because it was like one of the first like worlds I got into, thus it became pretty influential, and I'm already like prone to science fiction. I'm prone to alien invasion stories. Another one of my favorite games of all time is XCOM. And so like it kind of filtered right into that themology, you could say. But I've dabbled in Half-Life 1, but that's an old game now. I am interested in playing the Half-Life 1 remake that has come out recently. I'm definitely going to be looking into that. But Half-Life 2, I've always come back to it. It's a game that I can talk about with my friends, and I played it too early, played it growing up, have continued to play it occasionally just because it has nostalgia. And that's one of the things I'm most curious about diving in today's episode, is comparing my nostalgia for it to your fresh eyes on it. But I imagine we will get into that. But that's kind of my history with the series.
Yeah, and as we've talked about as we were preparing for this episode, I had actually never heard of Half-Life until the Orange Box started to get some buzz when people were talking. Because I mean, if you think about that, that's still just an insane deal to get all of those like now critically revered and like amazing games all together in one package is still pretty wild to think about. So when that came out, I had heard of Half-Life from that, but I didn't buy the Orange Box for some reason. Anyway, what we're alluding to is that this is my first time playing Half-Life 2 in the year of our Lord 2022.
Whew.
I was never a PC gamer until I still don't consider myself a PC gamer, but I never really started playing games on PC until a couple years ago because I just didn't have a laptop that could run most things, and I've never had a kind of, quote unquote gaming PC. So I always just kind of like, saw how everyone just reveres Half-Life 2, and I always just had it in the back of my head where I was like, someday if I'm in a position where I can, I would like to check it out. It became one of the like stops in gaming history that I kind of wanted to take, similar to when I played Earthbound, to check out what that was like. And this was interesting because, like, we'll get into some quick opening thoughts here. Like, it's interesting because this feels like a very simple game, but I think it's because so many games have been iterating on this since then. And so, like, I kind of came up with this analogy where it's like, if you showed someone the song Paranoid by Black Sabbath in 2022 and they listened to a bunch of metal music but never listened to Black Sabbath, they would be like, this is kind of simple, not much happening here. But it's because this came out and so many people like took that and then spun it their own way. And that's what Half-Life 2 feels like to me. But I did enjoy playing this game a lot. Like I had a good time with it. I think it still holds up gameplay wise. And it was just interesting to see like kind of this distilled first-person shooter with, the gravity gun, which is super fun too. What are your kind of just opening thoughts about Half-Life 2, Jay?
Well, I played most of it in preparation for this episode as well, just because I was kind of curious to see, thinking about it more critically, kind of what I would think about it. And I mean, I I still had fun. Like I enjoy this game, and it's more than just like the iconic sounds, because like that's what I noted when I played Half-Life Alyx. Like that's what zapped me right back into the world when I put on the VR headset, was the sounds of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was kind of worried. I was like, is that all this is going to be, is just like nostalgia? And I think that some things don't really hold up, are more boring than others because of the iterations that have been made. But the combat's still fun. The guns are still cool. Like all of those things, and the lore is good. I enjoyed all of it playing it again, and yeah, I imagine as long as I'm able to, which Steam and Valve continues to make this game accessible. Like you can buy it on Steam on any given day for like $1.50.
Right.
Everybody should play this game at some point. Like there's no excuse, and you'll see, how influential it's been. And that's kind of been what Valve's philosophy is. If they're going to make a game, they're going to make specifically a Half-Life game, it's got to be a bit revolutionary. It's got to break some molds and set some standards. And like looking back, that's what they did in 2004, looking at like the landscape of things at that time.
And so I don't have a lot of kind of context for what it was like in 2004. Like I think about what I was playing in 2004. I was probably playing Morrowind all the time, like switching between Morrowind and,
mm-hmm.
Madden 2005 or, whatever Madden game was out. That was basically all I played back then, was those two games on my Xbox. So I don't have a lot of like historical context for what it was like when Half-Life 2 came out, but in, talking with some people, and then we'll get into this in the episode, it's very cool to see like this little slice of history, and then see like extremely clear like through lines to future games in the genre, and even some future games that Valve did, which we'll talk about a little bit. So let's give the spoiler policy for today's episode. This one's going to be an odd one because this is the first like direct story sequel that I've covered on this show. And so in order to talk about the story setup of Half-Life 2, I am going to spoil what happens at the end of Half-Life 1, which, if you start up Half-Life 2, you're going to see this anyway. So I guess if you don't want to be spoiled on Half-Life 1, just skip ahead 15 minutes or so. And but I think it's going to happen regardless. Half-Life 1 is super old, and that's not the game in question here. Half-Life 2, we will keep story spoilers to the end, and in the spoiler section at the end of the show, like normal, I will have a lot of like really memorable moments that I think are very cool to experience for the first time unspoiled. So that will be the spoiler policy, kind of the first time that I'm playing a story sequel for the show, and thus spoiling the game that came before. So let's get into the story and the mechanics, what makes Half-Life 2 special. So the story setup in Half-Life 2, like we said, directly following the events of Half-Life 1, well, sometime in the future, but 20 years after the end of Half-Life 1, as far as I know. In the first game, there was an incident at the Black Mesa Research Facility where Gordon Freeman worked, where, oopsie, scientists accidentally opened a portal to a hostile alien dimension. Whoops, my bad. You play as Gordon Freeman, who we mentioned before, Gordon Freeman was the main character in Half-Life 1, I assume, because everyone in Half-Life 2 they react to Gordon Freeman walking in the room the same way I would react if Michael Jordan walked in the room. Everyone's like, holy shit, it's Gordon Freeman. I can't believe my eyes. And so Gordon Freeman is this well-known, like extremely well-known character within this universe, and you play as him again. And at the beginning, Gordon is woken up out of some kind of interdimensional stasis and put on a train to go into City 17, name of this city, where there is like this extreme police state happening that is controlled by the aliens from Half-Life 1, which I didn't know because I didn't know anything about Half-Life 1 because, you don't see a bunch of aliens right away. It's just soldiers in super armor and stuff, but they're not actually people in there. I don't know if they're just like wearing the armor or if it's actually like dead bodies being reanimated. Do you know what's going on here, Jay?
I don't know 100%, and I don't know if it's ever explicitly stated. I think the initial troops that you encounter in City 17, the ones with the white masks, I think those are people. I think based on the opening, and which this happens in the first 10 minutes of the game, but one of your cohorts reveals himself to be undercover.
Right.
And he takes the mask off. And it's not like a huge plot point or anything, and so that makes me assume the rest of them are also normal people that are being paid. They are the lowest level of the Nazi regime. They are the people that are being treated better than garbage. Like slightly better. Just to like keep the rest of the population contained.
Yeah. And so one of the things that's like really, really clear at the beginning of this game is that the aliens won. They're in control. And they have a puppet government of characters, one specific character from the first game, who is like the kind of voice of the aliens trying to like control the people, the human population. And so as you go into the beginning of the game, you see all these TV screens where you have these propaganda messages that this guy's giving. I forget his name. I probably should have written his name down.
That's Wallace Breen, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. You get these propaganda messages trying to like convince people to fall in line, follow what the aliens want them to do. Very like this is the only hope for the survival of our species type stuff. But also reads as propaganda at the same time. The main goal for the game is to find Eli Vance, who is Alex's father. Eli was an important person in the Black Mesa facility. Is he the leader, or again, should have written this down?
He is the current like leader of the Resistance.
Resistance.
I don't think. So the thing about Half-Life 1, and I only know this from discussions with friends who have played Half-Life 1, I don't think I've ever actually read a wiki or anything like info dump about Half-Life 1. It's just through osmosis of having conversations and people explaining it to me. So I may have this wrong, but like the scientists that you meet and Eli Vance, like they're not actually characters in Half-Life 1.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, they are, I believe they are introduced in Half-Life 2. There are scientists that look like, and, NPCs that repeat over and over and over again that look like these characters, but they aren't specifically those characters. I do think they are introduced in Half-Life 2. But I mean, okay. The fact that like, at least I take it as like that was understood that they kind of succeeded in at least like looping you in on who this was, and me as a 10-year-old kid probably vaguely understanding like that guy's important. And it's the same for Alex too. She was obviously not around because she's fairly young, and the games take 20 years apart. So
yeah, and there are like 4 or 5 important NPCs throughout the whole game. So there's not like a huge cast of characters to keep in track of.
No, not at all. Yeah.
And so your goal for most of the game is to find Eli and help him out for various reasons. That just becomes like the thing that you're working toward. And this is where I'm going to stop with story spoilers, except they're at the same time of this like alien, government, puppet government that is kind of ruling over the planet, the Earth, I guess. There is also kind of this like subplot of, and I don't know how related they are because the game doesn't like super explain it, but like there are these kind of zombie things going on. We mentioned that Jay is a professional headcrab farmer, and the world is full of these now iconic enemies called headcrabs, which are these four-legged kind of, I don't know, parasite-looking things. They jump on your head and they latch on, and you slowly become a zombie of sorts.
They're a little cuddly. I could pet a headcrab. Don't lie, Dave.
They make creepy noises and they jump on your head and kind of take over your entire body, but they do have a little bit of a cute quality. Like I wouldn't mind a head crab like plushie or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you liked Lamar, right? The one without the beak that Briner had. I mean, he kind of, he's kind of a pain, but he's also cute.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one's always getting into a bunch of mischief. Like if you think cats are a handful to keep under control, wait till you see this pet head crab that this guy has. Just always fucking shit up.
Yeah, just you know what? We'll take a field trip down to the farm. I'll show all the kids what the head crabs are really like. What it really means to take care of a head crab. It's not just you can't just water and feed it, you got to take it for walks, it's the whole thing, okay?
Right. So as you go through the game, there are these kind of two kind of subsets of enemies that you're fighting. You have the soldiers who are, fighting against you as the resistance team, and then you have these kind of various head crab and head crab zombie type enemies, and I think there's like a couple versions of the soldiers, and there's like 4 or 5 versions of head crabs, super head crabs, head crab zombie, super head crab zombie, stuff like that. So you kind of have these two things that are happening at the same time, and you have these kind of zones. Like this is a residential zone that is controlled by the military. This is a residential zone that they have kind of like locked up because the head crab zombie problem is too much and stuff like that. So it does mix up the gameplay as you go through, and you get a little bit of a story about how people are surviving in this world as you go through. And like the overall plot for Gordon to reconnect with Alex and then reconnect with Eli and stuff like that is kind of by the books for the most part. I think it's I already don't remember a lot of story beats from it, but it does a good job of getting you into the levels and stuff and getting you into these gameplay sections, which we'll talk about later. So the story does its job, but I do think it has a really interesting ending, which we'll talk about in the spoiler section. But I will just say, for people who haven't played, I now understand why so many people have been begging for Half-Life 3, because the ending of this game is interesting and ends on a cliffhanger. So, like, people are not just like, I mean, Half-Life 3 memes have become Half-Life 3 memes, but I do kind of get it now. If you're a big fan of this game ended on a cliffhanger, and that was 18 years ago. So, yeah.
Well, have you touched the episode 1 or 2 at all?
I haven't. I was kind of looking at those on Steam, but I decided not to play them.
Yeah, so they do pick up where Half-Life 2 ends off, but then episode 2 ends on what I would argue is a bigger cliffhanger.
Okay.
So
there we go.
You're still correct, but yeah, no, they do continue the story for a little bit, but no, it still ends with a gut punch for sure.
So the story, as I was going through, was kind of like, here's what you need to do to get through this level. Here's your goal for this level, and then you go through. Every half hour or so, you walk into a room and all the people go, holy fucking shit, is that Gordon Freeman? And then they're like, okay, you gotta go. And then there's an attack and they're like, hurry, you gotta go, Gordon. You go to the next place. Holy shit, Gordon Freeman. And then it continues. And I laughed every time the NPCs reacted like that, every time. So yeah, I enjoyed kind of like the flavor and like the lore and just kind of looking at the state of things in the game more than I enjoy the beat by beat story of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. Like, because Gordon famously does not talk, right? Like, you have no active role, which is sort of part of the story, once you get into, spoiler territory. I will talk about specifics, but talking about, like, just kind of panning around and looking at the world and seeing the condition of things, I think is really interesting. And I'm a sci-fi guy plus dystopia. This is full nonstop dystopia. I think the idea of the resistance fighters is really like not fun, but it's cool. Like, it's, epic, it's relatable, it's the underdog story because of just how badly humanity's gotten beaten down. There's one newspaper clipping, which you would pretty much have to know it exists before you go into the game, but that talks about the 7-hour war. So immediately following the events of Half-Life 1, Gordon, he saves the day, and I say in quotation marks. He prevented complete annihilation, but there was still this 7-hour war that preceded, where the Combine, which is the name of the alien force, come in, wipe out every army on Earth, and then that's where Wallace Breen, the guy you mentioned earlier, quote unquote, represents humanity and surrenders for them, and then he gets put as sort of the figurehead of humanity. I think, and all that stuff is interesting, but you only really get it if you like dive into the nitty gritty, or like finding out that the Combine, or like hearing an offhanded conversation that two NPCs are having in like an apartment before the action happens, where they talk about like that there's this force field in the city that prevents breeding, that prevents conception. So they're controlling how people, have kids. And yeah, just like the intensity of it all really gets nailed into you from the beginning, which I think is it's great world building to me.
Yeah, you definitely do get a sense as you go through the game that the resistance is like so outnumbered, and like the odds are very much stacked against you, and people are beaten down, and everyone's life is terrible. You definitely get that as you go through the game. So I think they did a good job of enforcing that as you go too. Because you go to these kind of base camps for the resistance throughout the game, and every single one of them is in like the most precarious, like we could be wiped out at any second situation that I have a hard time thinking of how it could be worse for humanity in the beginning of this game, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, they set the scene pretty well, and I think that's what makes the end of this game even more impactful, is knowing the importance of the actions that you are taking as Gordon Freeman. I think storytelling has come a long way. Like, the idea of a silent protagonist today is kind of off-putting. Like, I think about any of the games that I've loved recently. I'm thinking about like God of War, The Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, I can't imagine really a successful game. I mean, you have Doom, which is a whole other breed, but it's the same world building that you get in Half-Life. You like, Doom guy walks into a room and everybody's like, holy shit. that was Doom guy. So like, just making you feel like a badass, it's not bad. Not bad storytelling, I guess, as long as it makes you feel like a badass,
that's true.
But, not that Half-Life 2 is the same power fantasy that Doom is, but, it's still kind of, you saying that definitely like brought back those vibes for me.
Yeah, it's true. Like, this is actually something that bothered me about Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, where your character is clearly this ultra badass, the only hope for the world. You're saving the day left and right, and people still just treat you like dog shit all the time.
Yeah.
And that is not the case in Half-Life 2. Everyone is like, you know, this fight is hopeless, but holy fucking shit, Gordon Freeman just walked in the room. All right, we can do this. Gordon Freeman's here. And that does make you feel good, for sure.
Like, he's somehow wiggled his way into like one of the greatest characters of all time. But like, at least to me, you know, having grown up, played it, and been him. But today, by today's standards, he doesn't really stand up because he's non-existent. He is you. But yeah, it's just interesting that like they gave him a name, they gave him a look, they put him on the poster, but you don't even get so much as a mirror in the game. You know, it's really interesting. And but yeah, no, I totally agree.
One of the other things that like this game is kind of famous for, and Valve is famous for this as a developer, is kind of the way they tutorialize and get you into their games. Portal is like masterclass in this too, and I think Half-Life 2 is like on par with that, with like teaching you about game mechanics, how this game works, how the world works, without a character walking up to you and saying like, "Hey, Gordon, watch for things hanging from the ceiling. You might get caught." Instead, like, there are these enemies, they cling to the ceiling, they have this little tongue that goes down, and if you touch it, they will grab you and pull you up and eat you if you're not wearing a, you know, super suit. But this is an example. They don't have a character that comes up and tells you about this. You walk out a door and you see one of them catch a bird and pull it up and start eating it. And then you're like, oh, okay, I will be on the lookout for things hanging from the ceiling. And then you will spend the rest of the game kind of checking, and about 80% of the time I was able to spot those enemies ahead of time. Sometimes I got caught and surprised, but that's just an example. Like, this game does a lot of showing and not telling. And I really respect that. There's also this, you know, the famous part where you see the saw blade that had the enemy cut in half after you get the gravity gun. And then you go in the next room, there's some enemies coming, and there's that saw blade. Pull it back out, shoot it out with the gravity gun, and you learn how to kill things with the gravity gun. And not a word is spoken. It's all done through like the way things are placed and you know, encounter design and stuff like that. And I think that's something that is just very refreshing. Number one, not to sit through a cutscene of someone explaining to you, you know, every use for the gravity gun. Just kind of show me and let me figure it out. I am smart enough to figure this out. And I think this game does that really, really well.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed. Like, I did not have the wherewithal to like enjoy that perspective as a kid playing the game, but it's something that I
very few kids
like,
would have that perspective.
No, yeah. As a 10-year-old, I wasn't like, wow, you know, this is really intelligent level design. No, I didn't say that, but like going back, I'm like, that's why I was able to play it as a kid, because things were intuitive. You know, I was able to understand, and you know, somebody wasn't talking about it for 2 minutes about how it works. You know, they gave me the gravity gun and they said, hey, play fetch with this giant metal dog. And it's like, I understand that, you know, like I you know, just tell me the buttons to press and let me go. And yeah, you know, they do a great job of that every step of the way, you know, sort of implicitly. And then I think the biggest thing is that it teaches you these things, and then you have a plethora of ways to like explore those mechanics. And it sort of makes you feel smart for exploring those mechanics. And sometimes they come back later in the game. Sometimes they don't come back at all. But it still feels rewarding to be able to use all of those things. You know, to use that saw blade through the extent of Ravenholm. You know, and if you're an achievement hunter like I am, you know, there are achievements that push you towards things. It's like, go through Ravenholm with only using the gravity gun. And man, that's tough, you know, and things like that really, that's where other games got it from, you know. And I mean, obviously there were games before that had great level design, that had, you know, had great ability to teach you without, slamming you over the head with it or giving you a wall of text. But Half-Life 2 was, I think, maybe one of the first ones to do it, at least as far as like a shooter goes. Call of Duty wasn't anywhere near this at this time. It wasn't even as popular, even for what it is. You had like Unreal Tournament around, but they didn't have the same like puzzle mechanics or anything like that. And so it really, really elevated Half-Life 2.
Yeah, and it was something that I had heard about. This is something that like games people praise Half-Life 2 for. So I had heard this, and then I started playing it, and I realized that it's all over this game of like showing you, mostly not there's a couple things, like a couple weird things later on where it's like a one-time mechanic where they do kind of just tell you like, hey, do this to do this. But especially early in the game when you're like coming to terms with like what the game is and what you need to do, they do a really good job of showing, not telling. And another thing that I just want to praise this game for before we get into gameplay, like super heavy, is there are like, and this goes into level design, where there are a lot of times in this game where you need to move quickly through a level, and you're either being chased or there are a ton of enemies around and you just need to run and find a safe place. And I think this game is incredible at making you feel like you're desperate and like picking literally the first place you see, but that is the way the game wanted you to go the whole time. And they do a really good job of like guiding you along the path. Like in the first level, there's a chase on these rooftops, and you're running, you're being pursued, you are not super powerful at that point, and it feels like this really intense escape sequence because you're running and you're like, oh shit, there's a window, where should I go? Like, okay, I guess I'll try that window. And it's, they very cleverly set up the way that the level geometry is, and lighting, and all of these things that we've come to appreciate in games. This was here in Half-Life 2, and so when you're like, fuck, window, okay, I'm going to try it. That window was the way the game wanted you to go the whole time, but it feels like you're on this epic chase because you're just kind of making decisions in that stream of consciousness instead of, really picking like, I've come to a T intersection. Do I go left or right? It's really guiding you through this path very elegantly. And this happens several times throughout this game.
Yeah, I think that it's something that's influenced a lot of modern games, is the idea that this is a linear game. This is like
right.
the definition of, some might say, like it's very straightforward. There's hardly like two paths to take ever. There's multiple ways that you could take down enemies, different guns you can use, there's lots of different things as far as that goes, but it's a linear story. And I think that's where, like, honestly, I'm thinking about The Last of Us, like that is a linear story, but is still a world. They're still pushing you in one direction, but presenting you with different options combat wise that make it the whole experience feel fluid. And that's something I never really thought about with Half-Life 2, but like the urgency that it presents. I think all the levels are like burned in my brain, so I know exactly where to go. So I think that's something that I've lost over time. But yeah, you're right. I think that because like I'm thinking about that rooftop, and like when I'm getting pelted by pistol shots, like I know that I'm going to survive those pistol shots if I go to A to B to C and go through the window. But the urgency is something that I don't feel anymore, but it's right. It's there. It's slowly pushing you. And if you do stand around with your thumb up your ass, you're going to die. But, I think it does do a great job of pushing you in the direction that it wants. And, and there are, there's 1,000 caches of supplies that you can stop along the way, that are hidden and things like that you can stop and go get. But it's all optional. You can just keep on trucking if you want to. And, I think it can either provide a great story experience, a great gameplay experience, and, if you're into the treasure hunting kind of thing, it also has that too.
no, I won't say never, but I very rarely got to a point in this game where I was like, I don't know what to do or where to go. And all of those decisions felt really natural, where it was like, I see a radio tower here. Let me go check that out. And turns out that was where I was supposed to go. There, it doesn't feel like and this might be a little bit of like the time that it came out, but there's not a lot of wasted stuff on screen. Like there's a bunch of buildings you can go into, and if you go explore in the buildings, you'll find some of those like collectible lambda signs, or you'll find some health kits or some ammo and stuff like that. You'll be rewarded for poking around, but when you're trying to decide where to go, I really felt like this game did a great job of like, just kind of subtly pushing you toward the place where they want you to go. And that's something that Valve is like really, really revered for, is this way of making you feel like you figured it out when they were guiding you the whole time. And I've played both of the Portal games, and that's something I love about those, where a lot of times, like, I feel smart for figuring out the Portal puzzle, but Valve did a great job of teaching me about everything about those puzzles. And it's the same in Half-Life 2, for sure.
Yeah, it's the layered mechanics, right? It's the discovering that, oh, hey, I can... these are all the things I can use the gravity gun on, and they showed me those exploding barrels earlier, and you do 1 + 1, and you start chucking exploding barrels at enemies, and it's like small stuff like that, which like seems obvious by today's standards, but no one says, hey, let me borrow the gravity gun and show you how to launch explosives, or nothing like that happens. And it's just very intuitive. There's no, like, you never have to like check a map. There is no map, there's no waypoint system or anything like that, and so I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and I think this is a good place to transition into talking about gameplay a little bit. So in Half-Life 2, we mentioned this before, but this is like, if you've played a first-person shooter in the last 15 years, you've played Half-Life 2 in some ways, because this is a very simple version of that. As far as combat goes, you have every gun that has come to be standard in a first-person shooter throughout basically my whole life. You have a couple types of pistols, you have your shotgun, a couple types of, assault rifles, a carbine, some long range weapons too, grenades, stuff like that. It's very, very like what has become standard. I can't comment on what it was like in 2004 because I didn't grow up playing Doom, and, I guess Halo is the only other one that I played in this time period.
Yeah, Unreal Tournament's another one that I might throw in there. These are the two games I played a lot around this time period.
Right. But like Halo has some different types of guns, like a little bit more alien flavor in the guns, but Halo's basically the same as this, except you have a better melee capabilities in Halo than you do in Half-Life. But anyway, this is pretty standard. I played this game on easy mode. Fun fact, Jay, this is the first-person shooter that I've ever played with keyboard and mouse.
Wow. So how'd that feel? I'm curious.
It was difficult. Moving around with WASD is real hard for me. a little bit easier in Portal because, and I played Portal. I guess it's not the first time I've used a first-person control scheme on keyboard and mouse, but in Portal, you're not fighting. You're not going to die in Portal. And so I played this game on easy, and that felt like a good difficulty level to me. Enemies died in one headshot or, a couple shots to the body, they go down. That feels right as far as a shooter goes. One reason I play a lot of shooters on easy mode, like Uncharted, I've played all those games. I play those on easy because I don't like bullet sponge enemies. And so this felt like a nice difficulty challenge. I still died several times throughout the game. Easy mode is not literally like you're invincible. It's just felt real good to me. So this game's kind of like thing that makes it stand out, though, as far as gameplay and combat, is that gravity gun, which we talked about earlier. And the gravity gun has two functions. You can kind of shoot an energy blast to hit something that's in front of you. Only certain objects, like the game knows what you're pointing the gun at. So you can shoot this at people. You can shoot this to break boxes and other destructible things, but you can't just you can't shoot NPCs with it. And you can't just shoot a wall with it even. The game knows what you're pointing the gun at, and it will let you do that. Same goes for the kind of gravity thing that pulls things toward you. You can use this on all kinds of objects throughout the game. And when you pull something toward you with the gun, you grab it, then you can throw it. And that's when, like Jay said earlier, you get into all of these cool combat kind of, again, you feel like you're I wonder, should I pick up that explosive barrel and then throw it with the gravity gun? But the game has been teaching you to do it the whole time. And so you can get yourself out of a lot of sticky situations just with this one gun, and it's super fun. I had a great time just messing around with the gravity gun throughout the game.
Yeah, gravity gun, I would say, is one of the things that holds up in this game that I think is one of the best parts and is still extremely fun to use. And it's extremely fun to find ways to where you could win with a gun, but to choose to use the gravity gun instead, to kind of jank your way through some combat situations where it would be a lot easier to use an assault rifle, where you could just start picking up pieces of a crate and seeing how many times it takes to chuck a piece of wood at an enemy to defeat him. Not that I've done that specific thing, but there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with the gravity gun, as far as you can pull a sheet of metal to you for cover, I did that a lot, to, with even temporary boxes that are only going to last for a few hits. It could be those crucial moments, between enemies, or between cover where, you need that to be able to get to one spot to another. And, the gravity gun, absolutely iconic. I love it. And definitely one of the best guns in gaming, period. I think it was the perfect gun for this game, given, how much it uses the physics engine as well. The physics engine is that's probably beyond the guns, beyond what the game is able to teach you and level design and all that stuff. What the game does with its physics engine is probably what was technically the most revolutionary thing during the time period, because no shooter had physics puzzles, where you had to consider the weight of a cinder block, where the same way you'd have to do in Half-Life 2. And I've kind of been curious to hear your thoughts on that specific gameplay mechanic, because by now, it seems simple, maybe straightforward, but I was kind of curious what you felt about the puzzly side of things.
Real quick about the gravity gun. One thing that I really appreciated is you spend a lot of time in vehicles in this game. And there are a couple different kinds of vehicles, and it's a little bit janky. You can get the vehicle stuck pretty easily. There's lots of, downed cars and stuff like that, blown out cars and stuff. And it's kind of easy to get the vehicle stuck, but how you get them unstuck is you can use the gravity gun. You got your little buggy like wedged between two parked cars, just pop it out with the gravity gun, things are fine. And I really just had a great time with the gravity gun. I think this game would be good without it because the shooting is still pretty good. But like with the gravity gun, that's what elevates this into, like really fun, video game stuff. I had a great time. With the physics puzzles, yeah, like you said, they're pretty simple. Puzzles like you have a crane with a big magnet. You need to use it to pick up your car and move it into a new place in the level where you can, continue on driving and stuff like that. But you're using the physics of a crane swinging, like on a pendulum, or this magnet swinging at the end of a crane and stuff like that. I enjoyed it. They're not hard, and I don't want them to be hard. This isn't the type of game where I want really hard puzzles. I don't want to spend an hour trying to figure out a puzzle in this game. This game took me like 13 hours to beat. It's not a super long game. And the puzzles are short enough. They're there to kind of break up the pace a little bit, give you some quiet time, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I like knowing that this is one of the things that I encounter just playing a game over and over again, which I should probably just play a new game. But I refuse. And like I know the puzzles and I can go back and I remember them fairly well, as time continues. And so I was just kind of curious how you felt about it. But yeah, no, I remember you mentioned the quiet time. I think it's a great way to break up the action because the action can be so frantic, sometimes. And so, yeah, no, I think, I think you're right. Like it matches this game and, they save the brain bending puzzles for the end of the Portal games. And I think that's appropriate.
Yeah. And yeah, I was actually hoping to get some of your perspective on at least like what the physics puzzles were like back when you first played this in comparison to some of the other games you played. Because again, like I said, I don't remember, I guess Halo is my only point of comparison. And I don't remember Halo having physics puzzles. Halo is kind of just like, shooting, story, cutscene, more shooting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, if this was one of the first like first person shooters to incorporate like I don't want to say super realistic, but it's realistic enough, the physics engine, to kind of just add this dimension to it. And then so you have the puzzles, but also the physics engine plays into using the gravity gun, which is, again, just super fun.
Yeah, I think that's what, takes the game from good to great, because the gravity gun doesn't work without the physics engine, right? And it could be enough just to have the physics engine. You go in, you pick things up like a normal character, or maybe you grapple them to yourself or something like that, a traditional way. But then the gravity gun takes it from good to great, I think. And to me, that was one of the first person shooters I ever played, and like that, it just made everything else in the era not as fantastic. Like I think about like I didn't play games like Unreal Tournament 3 online because my parents let me play Unreal Tournament, but they wouldn't let me play online, which I think was probably a good choice. But I think like I played the campaign for that I don't know how many times, and that's just like glorified capture the flag, which is fun for what it is. And Call of Duty, you go from A to B to C, you got to kill a certain amount of guys, but and find all the intel drops and things like that, and sometimes they're hidden behind trick walls. But other than that, nothing like that exists. And honestly, it continues to influence games that are outside the shooter genre. Even in games a few years later, I'm thinking about like the Resistance series that had like a similar weapon wheel, for PlayStation. And, that took the gun influence, but it didn't have the same like in-depth like puzzle. And like you said, it's not incredibly difficult, but it was there. And, it was something other than just Sergeant, what's his face giving you an info dump about some aliens, it's definitely, it's more interesting than that, at least.
Yeah. So this, like the gameplay, especially when you're using the gravity gun, it becomes like this kind of like, how do I want to say this? Like this just really like blissful experience of like playing around with the gravity gun, figuring out like what this game and what this engine is like allowing you to do. And all the while, a lot of times, like I said before, you feel like this is your idea. So you get this positive reinforcement. Like, I wonder if I use this gravity gun to blow out these support beams under this platform, will this thing that I want fall down to me? Yes, it will. And I really need some health. There's some health over there. I can't jump to it. It's too far to jump. Is it within gravity gun range to pull to me? Yes, it is. Like it's just this constant like figuring out what the boundaries are of this system, and it goes a lot further than I would have expected. Like I know this game's not ancient, but it did go a lot further than I expected it to.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that gets me going back to it as well, is that it, like, I keep expecting it to be old, and it isn't. It's just it
doesn't feel old.
It's basic. I like in comparison, I will call it it's simple even, but it's not old. Like it holds up. Maybe not, like that I run Crysis 3 on, my laptop because it's so beefy, it's not, the textures aren't going to be great, but it's still fun. Like it's still a fun game, and you can see the origins of so many others. If you're a gamer, then yeah, like you would do yourself a service and play Half-Life 2. Yeah.
It does get into this wonderful feeling that you're in a playground of stuff to interact with and figure out and have fun with. And like one of my favorite first-person shooters is Titanfall 2 because of like that really fun kind of like just state of like play that you find yourself in. Like,
yeah,
these are playgrounds to run and wall and like wall run, jump around, and do all these extra mechanics that they throw into in Titanfall 2. And I got into that same like playground state in Half-Life 2, which is again much older. This was a long time ago now, and yeah, really enjoyed the gameplay here.
Yeah, I think Titanfall 2 is actually a really great comparison. I like that game a lot. And I think the sort of similar, like really light story, a little bit of lore sprinkled in here. And yeah, obviously you get more active characters, I would say. But as far as like gameplay wise, like it just, it absorbs you for a different reason. Like a lot of games will grip you with the story, but it truly like takes some special gameplay to grip you with like what is happening and what you're doing. And Titanfall 2, Half-Life 2, both of those games do that excellently. And I think like Half-Life 2 isn't as exciting. You're not, there's no wall jumping, there's no running across the walls or doing anything like that. Like it's still 2004. When you walk, your camera goes in a straight line, like there's no,
yeah,
like you can feel like you're floating sometimes, but it's still, it doesn't, I don't think it takes away from anything. The only thing I will say about this game is that jumping like is bad.
Jumping is hard.
Yeah.
So this is a good segue into the next kind of like, miscellaneous mechanic. Gordon is wearing this kind of like super suit that allows him to breathe underwater, have a flashlight, run super fast, etc., etc. What it doesn't allow him to do is jump high or jump in a way that feels good to control. And this is probably the thing that caused me the most frustration throughout the game. Was there was a lot of times where I was like, man, you are legit wearing like a robot super suit right now. Why can you not make this 6-foot jump? This doesn't make any sense to me. Or like, I guess if you're running super fast, you can jump over a pretty good distance, but like, why can you not jump more than 2 feet in the air? Like, even with this super suit, Gordon has like a 20-inch vertical jump. It's pretty ridiculous.
It's bad. Yeah, no, it's pretty tough. I almost wish there had been some sort of, I think it would have been maybe beyond their capabilities, but some sort of way where you could propel yourself with the gravity gun, maybe, like jump and shoot at the ground and push yourself, to get that double jump, so to speak, would have been cool.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that would have been a little tough to pull off for 2004. But yeah, no, jumping is rough. I would say when I play, I'm not looking forward to moments when I know I have to do any sort of light platforming or anything like that. Like the very first puzzle of the game, when I replayed it this last time, all you have to do is take the cinder blocks and put it on one end of the seesaw, and then you can jump off the seesaw to reach a higher area, right?
Right.
I fell, and it's a jump with no consequences. You fall like 4 feet, but I could not make the jump the first 10 times. I was streaming for a buddy of mine, and we were just losing it. And I was just like, what? Like, Gordon Freeman, conqueror of worlds, protector of Earth, cannot make this jump. And it right now it's funny, but it can be frustrating.
I remember distinctly that puzzle where it was like, oh, okay, I put 2 cinder blocks on the seesaw. This is now a jump that me, Dave Jackson, the real person, I could make this jump looking at it. And then you jump and it's not high enough. And you put another cinder block on and you jump and it's still not high. And you're like, fuck, I got to put another cinder block on there. Like, this is now a jump that like you don't even need to be running to make this jump. You just step across it. But yeah, it's the jumping is probably the thing that I found most frustrating. You're right. Specifically like how high vertically you can jump. And they want you to use the gravity gun to move boxes to jump on top of and make yourself little platforms and stuff like that. That's probably why, because like thinking of like Deus Ex, you have similar, it's not a super suit, it's your actual legs in Deus Ex, but like you get super jumps in those games. And I think that would have fit really well here with the suit that Gordon's wearing. But I get they want you to use the gravity gun and stack stuff and stuff like that. I get it. But still a little bit frustrating. And there were definitely some white knuckle moments doing some platforming on the side of a cliff or something like that. Like any time where I'm like, oh, platforming time. Or like in Ravenholm, you're doing a bunch of stuff on these platforms and rooftops. And if you fall down, it's a long trek back up to where you fell down from. So that's definitely probably the least fun part of the game, I think.
Being a PC game, you can pretty much save whenever you want,
right.
So that is one benefit, that you're able to do. And so I, take copious advantage of that when I play these days. It's something I didn't realize, but yeah, almost like falling not to your death is almost more annoying, because I'm like, just start me back up there, please. Like, just like, bring me back. And especially like when you lose health and you're like barely alive and it's like, okay, I guess it's time to get out the grenade.
And speaking of with your suit, this kind of ties into how your health system works. You have like shields on your suit that protect you, like Halo. Basically, if you've played Halo, you understand this. And then you have your actual health. If your health goes down way far, sometimes your suit will heal you a little bit. It will. I think it actually says like injecting morphine and stuff like that. Like, it will bring you back up to not full health, but it will get you out of the red. Sometimes I was never able to get a handle on like what would trigger this, but it does happen sometimes. Do you know, Jay?
Yeah. So what triggers it is when a poison head crab attacks you. It probably happened a lot in Ravenholm.
Okay.
Yeah. So that like your suit is injecting like an anti-venom into you. That's kind of what's happening. Yeah, because like the venom, like the poison mechanic goes straight through the armor. So I don't know if you ever noticed that, but you might still have 50 pips in your armor health, but poison head crab will get you. You go straight down to 1, and then you start going back up. Which one of the things that always, like, really small things that always kind of bothered me about the game, but was nice mechanically, is like you get hit with a poison head crab. You were at 25 health. It brought you down to 1. And then your suit will take you back up to like 75 health.
Right.
Which I was like almost thankful to get hit at that point. But yeah, so that was that particular mechanic.
Yeah. And your suit has kind of an energy meter whenever you're using one of its special functions, like you said, the flashlight, breathing underwater, sprinting. This is all kind of governed by how much energy your suit has. This is different from your shield. And so it limits how long you can swim and how long you can sprint, how long you can have your flashlight on. And it's all just tied into this one bar, which is nice. And there are some sections in the game where you definitely need that flashlight out. There are some, I wouldn't call them scary, because this isn't a jump scare game, but there are some dark things. There's some dark levels where there are scary things waiting for you around the corner. There's a lot of surprises and stuff like that. I was worried because I had heard people say this game was scary, and like people who listen to this show know I don't like scary stuff. I don't like jump scares specifically, but this was fine. It got tense sometimes, but you're more powerful than any of the enemies you come across as long as you are, playing on easy mode like me and kind of paying attention, not dicking around. You'll be okay.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I do think like Ravenholm has become less scary as I've grown up playing it over and over again. But yeah, that was I had to go get Dad for that one. I was definitely young enough where I was like, I'm not doing this one alone. And yeah, no, like Ravenholm is the closest it gets to that. But I would not call this a scary game per se. I don't think that at all. That's right. The energy meter. That was one thing that I disliked about the game, is that your flashlight and everything is tied into the one energy meter. And maybe it's because they do separate them in the episodes. So in episode 1 and 2, you do have a separate like flashlight and energy meter. So like you can actually have the flashlight on when you're underwater and not, be doubly consuming.
It is interesting that it's like this sci-fi super suit, but it only has enough energy to keep a flashlight on for like a minute and a half. Which is kind of interesting.
Well, it's interesting because and I'm going to show my nerd here a little bit. It's an HEV suit, which is, I've always equated it more similar to like a hazmat suit, to be honest. Like, I think it provides some armor capabilities, but to be honest, like, I always thought, man, Gordon Freeman's just holding his breath down there. Like, that's why it comes out of the energy meter. But also, yeah, regardless, yeah, it should be, he should have a little bit more flashlight to him, more than a wind-up does anyways.
Well, you have about as much energy to like sprint at superhuman speeds as you do to keep a flashlight on, which don't feel like they would consume the same amount of energy if we're thinking that way. But anyway, this is kind of the two things you're managing is your shields and your health, and you find lots and lots of pickups around the world, and then also like before any big staged, combat encounter, you'll find lots of recharge stations and stuff like that to get yourself topped up. I was playing on easy mode, but I rarely went, a long time without finding these pickups. Maybe I was playing on easy mode, so I didn't need them as often, but they are really, really common. This isn't like a game where you're going to be at low health, super tense for hours at a time, or even like more than 5 to 10 minutes at a time. It's pretty generous, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I would say I don't know if the like health and ammo, if that generates more or less based off the easy, medium, hard. But
Hmm.
I know the enemies get spongier and you take more damage as well. I know that, but I don't know if the ammo changes. And so like you do need that on the higher difficulties. Like you need that constant refill because like I get the sense they never really wanted you to go into an encounter, or a big encounter low on health. Like that
Right.
that's not fun. Like it was the point of the game is not survival. It's not, like you do have to do some ammo conservation at some point if you want to use certain guns at certain points. But I mean, other than that, you can pretty much get by. And like, even if you were plumb out of ammo, you still have the gravity gun and you can still do cool things with that. So,
Yeah, and that was a situation I found myself in a few times where, again, I'm not great at first-person shooters, so I did find myself out of ammo from time to time, but you always have that thing in your back pocket where you get the gravity gun out, start looking around. All right, there's a box over here. Let me pick this up, throw it at this enemy here, and you can get yourself out of most situations like this. You can also they introduced turrets in this game that are very similar to the turrets in Portal, if you've played Portal. And you can use your gravity gun to, first of all, take them out of action, but then also you can place them for yourself, which is really, really helpful later in the game. And they'll tell you, like, hey, man, set up some turrets. There's people coming. And you do get a little bit of, like, strategy. I'm not a big fan of these, like, there are waves of enemies coming, defend the room. I've never been a huge fan of those types of things, but you have enough things to like keep those fresh in this game, your turrets, your gravity gun, all the different guns, your grenades and stuff. I never really found this game to be not fun. And again, it's not too long, so those things don't really drag the way they could.
that's the thing that gets me too and I think that's why I enjoy the game every time I go back to it, is because when I go to the section with the turrets, I'm looking forward to it, and then just when I've had enough, I'm moving on to the next thing.
Right. Yep.
I think that happens a lot, where they know exactly, they're very good at climaxes, and I think combining the climax of where you're at story wise and where you're at, game mechanic wise, I think those two things match up really well, because like, the turrets, one of my favorite mechanics, it's fairly simple, but the way that they do it, the environment that they do it in is always a good time to go back to. Yeah, no, the turret section. The other one I think of is the antlion section. Using the pheromones is another one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was fun too. And I think that general feeling of like by the time you're tired of this, it's over, kind of extends to the game as a whole. Like the sections of the game as a whole almost never wear out their welcome. One of the driving sections was a bit long, but driving in the game is fun enough that I wasn't like, man, this sucks, I want it to be over. It was just like, okay, I think I'm ready to move on. And then 5 minutes later, I was moving on. And
Hmm.
that happens basically throughout the entire game. It's really, really well paced.
Yeah, no, pacing is a good way to frame it, because yeah, no, the driving sections, you know, it's not Need for Speed, guys.
Yeah.
That is not, but it's good enough to get you and make the world feel expansive too. I think it would almost feel way too small if you weren't, moving yourself from spot to spot occasionally using these vehicles. And I think it never expects you to like jump out, stop, combat, go back in the car, stop 5 seconds later and attack again. It's very obvious when it wants you to stop because your progress will be stopped. Other than that, it's a chase scene. and I think it balances those things pretty well.
We didn't mention this before, but I think the sound design in this game is really good. Like the music is excellent. Like the music that plays as you go through the levels, the opening main menu music is like just incredible. And I mean, I didn't know this at the time because I played Portal first, but like that music that plays when the Portal guy with like the valve on the back of his head comes up, I didn't know that was from this game, and they just like kind of continued that.
Sure.
And yeah, it's really, really good. And then like the sound design on the enemies is super creepy. Like the, kind of like the radio garbles from the Combine is good. Yep. I love how they make a kind of static sound when you kill them. So you killed them even if you can't see them. It's really, really helpful. It's something that in my episode on Returnal, I really, really praised Returnal for giving you information via sound because your eyes are busy. And this game does that really well too. And of course, the zombie head crab noises there, creepy as fuck too. But yeah, the sound design and music in this game is awesome.
Yeah, no, the soundtrack is something that I've pulled up on Spotify many times before. Just like I enjoy listening to soundtracks just in general. But yeah, no, it's definitely one that sets a certain tone that I really enjoy and really fits the sci-fi-ness to it. Even like the actiony, the upbeat ones, have a certain techno to them that I really enjoy. And yeah, you're right. Like the sound design of the enemies is iconic to me, and for a good reason. That radio garble, like it's garble, but it provides a lot of information, about like what's going on, and you get the like go 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 go, like when they're like pressing and things like that. And yeah, no, I really do enjoy it. And like the AI isn't quite on, like, I would say a standard of like like the game that you might never play, but Fear has notoriously great AI combatants. It's in the same vein. Fear is better. It's honestly one of the best ever. But yeah, no, the AI, is still great in this game.
Yeah, it is good. They'll definitely like, and I don't think I've played enough FPS or shooters in general to really comment on like, this game has good tactical AI, but they will flank you. They will split up. They'll try to get behind you and stuff like that. And so you kind of can just like camp out and shoot from the same spot. But like if it's a, like those turret sections, they will come from all sides. They won't just all run through the same doorway, which is a game that I just finished playing, which will be on the show someday, Deathloop, which is a very fun game, but the AI will literally just run in a single file line through the same doorway. And in Half-Life 2, they won't do that. They'll go around, they'll try to flank you, and it does really mix up the combat. And yeah, it's good. But again, some of those sounds are very, it's just creepy and giving you information, and then that soundtrack during the fights is really good. It is a soundtrack that I would listen to outside of the game.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I give a lot of credit to the sound design team here. I think they did a great job. And yeah, no, it's the same thing I said earlier. Like, it's something that I know well, and like I can hear the sounds, in my dreams. I've played the game so often, but it's good to hear from a new player's perspective as well that you enjoyed it. So that's pretty cool.
get into some kind of closing thoughts here, this is just a well-made, very fun video game. Like, that's kind of my thoughts as a video game, playing it for the first time in 2022 without thinking about historical context much. As I went on this show, that's kind of my goal, is like, let's talk about and appreciate the context at the time, but I am a person playing it in 2022. I need it to be fun in 2022, you know. But this game it holds up. It's really fun. Again, like, the story is enough to get you going, and then there are some very cool and very, like, mysterious things that happen. But the story wasn't what was pushing me through the game. I was never like, I got to get to the next story beat and find out what's going to happen. It was always like, I want to see what the next level will hold. I want to see what they've designed gameplay wise, because I was having fun the whole time with the gameplay. Because they just do such a good job of finding ways to mix up what you did in the last level, or, hey, let's do something totally different. You know, we had like 3 levels of iteration on the gravity gun. Now we're going to give you something totally different. You're not going to use the gravity gun here. And then after the next part, let's build up something else. And it's just really, there's never a point in the game where I was like, I'm getting tired of this. It's just really, really fun. And again, really well paced. And then by the time I was ready for the game to be over, I was in the last level. So yeah, just very good. Again, that Black Sabbath analogy holds up for me. Like, you listen to, you know, Paranoid for the first time in 2022, you may think it to be pretty simple compared to today's metal music, but that's because people have been using Black Sabbath as an influence for 50 years at this point. And that's the same way I feel about Half-Life 2. And Paranoid still holds up as a good song. That's why it was the thing that came up, as Half-Life still holds up as a fun game.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, the analogy holds up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I echo a lot of the same thoughts that you have. I think it's very affirming to hear you say that, you know, because like I feel all the same things about this game, but I can never quite I can't see what's on the other side of my nostalgia tinted glasses, right?
Mm-hmm,
and
right.
So to have that confirmed is enjoyable, but you also as a gamer too, can, see these things and make those connections, even though you're on a mouse and keyboard, despite, the lack of, controller in your hand is very cool to hear. But yeah, no, I mean, Half-Life 2, if you can tolerate, what did you say? 12 and a half hours, 13 hours, it can be longer if you really want to like dive in and walk around in the beginning parts, but I mean, really, that's about as long as you're gonna expect to play this game. And yeah, no, I would highly recommend it to pretty much anybody, anybody that's into gaming, that's never played it before. I think it's well worth your time, and well worth the 50 cents that you might spend on Steam for it.
Right. Yeah. I used to kind of talk about price a little bit in the show. I don't talk about it much anymore, but that can't be understated, that like, this is a very good, very influential video game. It will run on most computers. If you have a modern computer, it can probably run it. I've mentioned several times in the past, my laptop that I use for gaming is a real piece of shit. I can barely play. There are games that came out in 2006 that I can't play on my computer, but it will run Half-Life 2, and it will run it with very little like technical problems. And like Jay said, it goes on. I mean, even without it going on sale, it's full price. It's probably like $10. And then when it goes on sale,
yeah.
it's literally like 99 cents when it goes on sale. You basically get this game for free. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I would recommend this to people who want to see, very influential stops along the history of gaming for sure recommend it to those people. But like, if you like first-person shooters, which I'm not a giant fan of FPS, but if this is a genre that you really like, yeah, you should play this. It's a fun FPS, and the gravity gun just takes it kind of a notch above. It's just the gravity gun is so much fun to play with. That still to this day holds up really, really well, and like has only really been matched by the amount of fun I had playing Portal, and we mentioned Titanfall 2 and stuff like that. So yeah, good game. Both of us recommend. Before we get into spoilers, a little housekeeping here for people who are going to tap out now because you don't want spoilers for Half-Life 2. Before I start talking about me, Jay, one more time, give Super Bracket Bros another plug here.
Yeah, if you want to check out Super Bracket Bros, you can find us anywhere Tales from the Backlog is found. So pretty much any podcast platform whatsoever, you're going to be able to find Super Bracket Bros. If you want to find us on social media, we're on Instagram and Facebook. So you can find us, tag us on there, comment on a post. If you're coming from this podcast, we definitely would love to hear that. But yeah, we're talking gun characters, we're talking the John Wicks, we're talking Mass Effect characters, we're talking Lara Croft. We've got a guest appearance coming up soon with the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers who have been on this podcast as well. So if you enjoyed them, come hear us hang out as well. But if this is where you're dropping off, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Dave, for having me on.
Yeah. Once again, people check down in the show notes for Super Bracket Bros stuff. You'll find links to all social media, places to find them, and everything that they've got going over there. But one more time, it's a show that I really do enjoy listening to. Jay and Eli are good hosts. It's a good time. And not just because I guested on an episode. I had an awesome time on that episode, by the way. For Tales from the Backlog, the best thing to do, as always, to support is to subscribe if you haven't already. If you have enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a rating and review if your podcast platform allows it. And Tales from the Backlog has a Discord server where, when this episode comes out, we'll have people talking about Half-Life 2, other video game stuff, other, talking about movies and life and stuff like that too. We got a good group of people in the Discord server, and we would love to have you too. So you'll find links to all of those things down in the episode description as well. Also consider checking out A Top 3 Podcast, which is my other show, which is kind of a cousin with Super Bracket Bros. I feel like who would win in a fight, and top 3 lists are at the very least cousins, perhaps siblings. So that show is a good time. Please consider checking that out if you would like to hear more of me. You want to hear me talk about something that's not video games, there you go. We're going to take a break. When we come back, it is spoiler time for Half-Life 2. All right, Jay and I are back, and we're ready to talk spoilers for Half-Life 2. And for me personally, like I said in the kind of non-spoiler section of the show, the story itself is not something that I was gripped by. So we'll talk about the ending. Of course, the ending is real good. But I have just some real memorable moments throughout the game. We didn't mention Dog in the you mentioned Dog. We didn't really talk about Dog a whole lot. Dog is very cool. The first time you learn how to use the gravity gun by tossing a giant hunk of metal for Dog is cool. And then every time Dog showed up throughout the game, I was like, fuck yeah, Dog's here. We're going to be okay. Dog's real good.
Everybody, everybody's like, holy shit, it's Gordon Freeman. They should be like, holy shit, it's Dog.
Yeah. In Half-Life 3, people are like, yeah, Gordon Freeman, like, we get it, man, you're cool, but holy shit, Dog's here.
Dog is incredible. Like the moment that he takes down. Wait, no. Oh, does that happen in this game? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to separate the episodes.
I think there's a moment where he takes down like an airship in this game.
Yes, okay. Thank you. That's what I'm thinking of. He takes down the airship, and yeah, no, it's just it's amazing. Like it's like that's where like it gets close to like cinematic, and just that whole section of the game where you're like fighting the Striders and you're like toting a rocket launcher around and you've got guys following you around. I think is like that's one of the areas I think it goes a bit long for me, but like taking down a Strider is so badass. Like, yeah,
that was the hardest part of the game for me. It took me a long time to like fully explore that level and find all the ammo stashes and stuff like that, the rockets, to take them. And I felt like there were just like maybe like one or two too many Striders to take down. That was probably the point in the game where I was having the least amount of fun. But again, it's not bad. I was playing on easy mode, so it's not like I was just being ground into dust and super frustrated. I was just like, oh man, another one? Okay, well, here we go. Back to Dog. That's something that like the second you see Dog on the screen, you're like, I love that. I love Dog. Like the second he's on screen, the second you see him move, you're like, I love him. I need that. And it's really interesting because Dog doesn't, just a big hulking robot, doesn't even really look like a dog, just on all fours. And I think Valve kind of does a good job of making these almost, well, Dog's not inanimate, but like these non-human things just like very lovable. Specifically, my other point of comparison is like, the companion cube in Portal. You form a sort of attachment to it, even though it's literally just a big metal cube. And in this game, Dog has a lot of personality, and the animation's really good. That might be one thing that like may stand out from a lot of games in 2004 is like the animation, especially on Dog, is still holds up, I think, and makes you like him a lot more.
The closest comparison I can think of to Dog is Wall-E. That's what Dog makes me think of. Like, obviously they're both robotic, but the way in which their various mechanisms, show their emotion, I think is very similar, and I think like Dog with his panels around his singular eye that like go outward and inward and kind of inflect on how he's feeling. And I think also how protective he is of Alex. I think is very endearing, and the same way where like you can tell like he's just a big old sweetheart, and like kind of the same thing with Wall-E. Like he's just a little sweetheart, he's significantly less powerful, but like they are very very similar in that way, and that's kind of the one-to-one I make. I'm not saying that Pixar stole the idea from Wall-E from Half-Life 2, but I think there are some similarities there.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Like, again, the same feeling that all the NPCs had when they're like, holy fuck, Gordon Freeman. That was how I felt. I was like, holy fuck, Dog's here. Awesome.
It's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay.
Especially in that kind of lead up to the last level where like you've been fighting through these buildings for like forever. It feels like you've been just going through these apartment buildings forever, and then like suddenly Dog's there and he's gonna like rip open this panel and give you a way into the base and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I was like, that's my dude.
Yeah, no, Dog showing up is great, and you just know when he's not around, he's just out there kicking ass. Like he's just out there, just like taking out way more Combine soldiers than you are. just absolutely making up mess of those guys.
Yeah, I kind of like at some point in the story, I was like, I really hope they don't kill Dog in
Oh,
here, and
God.
there's a couple points where it was like, I thought Dog was outmatched, but he wasn't. He's the ultimate badass. If
Mhm.
Dog is in Super Bracket Bros at some point, like, God help whoever he's pitted up against.
We have Alex in this particular season. It was
Right.
very tempting to put Alex and Dog as a team. I think if I hadn't played Half-Life Alex, I think I would have reserved Alex to eventually be on a team with Dog and to bring them into like a duo bracket, but
Oh man.
which I think is still going to happen at some point. But yeah, for now, it is just Alex, who is a great character into herself, I think. But yeah, no, Dog. If we keep doing Super Bracket Bros for as long as I think we will, Dog will show up.
And again, unless it's like a bracket of all the, super robots, like just imagining like, Dog versus the Hulk or something like that. Like, or it would have to be someone who can match, because Dog just destroys everything that he needs to.
Yeah, Dog messes things up. Like Dog could take on some serious like Marvel and DC heroes and villains. Like I see Dog like launching himself off a building at Iron Man, and like I think he could take a chunk or two out of him. But yeah, no. Love Dog.
Oh yeah. Let's see some other moments that I thought was cool. We talked about the antlions just like briefly, and
Mm-hmm.
the that section felt really weird, like where you have like the pheromone ball and you're
Yeah.
controlling your little horde of antlions. That was interesting as like a shakeup, but I did feel kind of cool in a weird way, like strolling into all these combat encounters surrounded by my posse of
With your posse
antlions.
of
Like,
antlions, yeah.
yeah, I am the king of the antlions. Like, the Combine cannot fuck with me right now. It was very silly, but I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I like that section a lot. I think like it's it's probably one of the easier sections, like because I mean you just hit anywhere near the Combine and they're toast. And I love the idea, like I love the areas where you have to go in, you have to turn off the ground pound machine to be able to get your posse into where they need to get into, because like these once terrifying creatures are now your companions. And yeah, no, it's a pretty satisfying little section. Another section I think maybe stays on just a tad too long if I'm remembering correctly, but honestly, I just like the uniqueness of it and how I love any game where it's you and two other factions like going at it, where it's like a 1v1v1 kind of situation, and the antlions kind of bring that aspect to it.
Yeah, and it was interesting how like the antlions and the Combine will fight each other even if you're not controlling them at the time. And that's something I really like in I like when I can do that. Like, you're right, like that 1v1v1. Like, I can use what I know to pit the other two sides against each other, and I can just chill and clean up after they're all done. The thing about the antlions thing was like in the beach section where you're controlling them, they felt really powerful, and you can, toss the pheromone ball into those, those turret rooms, and they'll just clean everybody out. And then you go into like the building after that, and it's full of turrets and stuff, and the antlions were just getting destroyed left and right. And when they die, a new one comes up to replace the one that died, but they were just, they stood no chance against the turrets and all the dudes in the hallways there. But it was still just weird and kind of fun to, like, the antlions die, I kill all the enemies in the room, I go into the next room, these other antlions come out of the floor, they join up, they die in 30 seconds, and then we repeat. It was just like, just still feels good to go through the building with your posse of these just weird fucking creatures.
Yeah. No, I think it's kind of the same. Once you're in the building and then like you got turrets in your way, it like does. It's a great way to like give you a new challenge, I would say, to like overcome, because at that point like you're like, oh, antlions are OP, and then they throw in these long hallways and turrets, and then like these melee units, they can't do anything. And it makes you think around that organically, and I really I really appreciate that. But yeah, no, I think the fauna of the world, I think, has always been cool to me, but I think that's also like a bit of nostalgia, because like that's been my like frame of reference for other sci-fis that I've gotten into.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I've always loved the design of the antlions and the head crabs, and especially, I mean, what would you think of the king shit antlion?
I found that to be kind of frustrating, even on easy mode. Gameplay wise, like design wise, it's horrific that those things are just out on the beach. Yeah. So I enjoyed that from like a, enemy design perspective. Like I didn't have fun fighting them. Even on easy mode, they still take forever to kill. But it's not, anything that like breaks the game. There's like 2 of them you have to fight in the entire game. It's not a huge deal.
No, it's not a regular occurrence by any means. And I think when you hit the second one, you're a bit more powered up, and I think it's a little easier to take down, if I'm remembering correctly.
There's one in the building that like, it did go down a lot quicker than the others, because there's a combine in the room, I think, when that second one comes in, and they'll fight it, they'll all die, but they'll weaken it a little bit.
Yeah, no, the Combine don't really stand a chance. They can use the head crabs to their advantage. They've got the missiles that they drop and the head crabs jump out of. But yeah, no, the antlions seem pretty opposed to their existence.
That was such a fucked up like idea that like the Combine sends these missiles that are not. It's not like explosive missiles. They literally land and they just release head crabs in the area, which is such a fucked up sci-fi horror idea. I love it.
Yeah. No, it's great though. It's you're right. It's such a cool idea. I'm so glad that they did it. But yeah, no, it's terrifying. But it's a biological weapon. They are like sending in an infestation. Like that's exactly what the bad guys in the Alien series wanted to do. Like they wanted to like get these alien eggs, these xenomorphs, and just chuck them into societies they didn't like. Yeah,
it's real fucked up. Before we get to the ending, are there any other kind of moments throughout the story that you want to talk about?
So you mentioned like that there's a few characters, like 4 to 5 characters that are actually like named that you talk to and interact with. I was kind of curious what you thought. Like, were there any standouts among them? In particular, I'm kind of curious, if you liked Alex as a character, because I enjoy her a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Alex spends a lot of time off screen, like radioing to you, or like you're trying to find Alex. So when you do find her, I mean, I enjoy her personality. I think the voice acting is good.
Yeah.
I think it's funny how like she'll be in a totally different portion of the building that you're in, and she'll be like, all right, Gordon, I'll be right there. And then she just falls out of a vent, like right next to you, like a couple seconds later. I always thought that was kind of fun. I don't really have a lot of thoughts about Alex. I thought she was cool, and cool how she's, capable. And this is something about the game in general, but like, can you imagine how annoying it would have been if you would have had to like protect Alex and you got a game over if she died or something like that? I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yeah.
But as a character, I don't have a whole lot to say about her from this game. I read that the episodes are either, do you play as Alex in the episodes, or is she just like a bigger character in them?
She's a much bigger character. You spend a lot more time with her. And I think that probably adds a lot to her. She gets
Right.
much more directly involved in the story.
And
And
then Half-Life Alyx, of course.
you play as Alex.
Right.
It's a prequel to Half-Life, or Half-Life 2, sorry. And so, yeah, no, obviously that gives you another perspective on her. But yeah, no, I was just curious.
Yeah, the other characters, like Eli, very personable, very likable, but not a whole lot there. He's basically, he shows up and he's like, oh, Gordon, Alex, how's it going? And then he disappears and you're trying to find him. And then you find him and he's like, I'm okay, everything's okay. And then something else happens to take you away from him. He was fine. I actually like the bad guy, the puppet head, the figurehead guy. I kind of liked him. Until the very end of the game, he didn't seem like a, mustache twirling villain. He seemed like, at least in some part, like a very believable, like, this is the only chance we have right now. Like, and then at the end, it does kind of go into like, okay, we have to stop this guy. But for the most part, throughout the first 3/4 of the game or so, I felt like, okay, this guy is set up to be the villain. He's probably not a good person, but there's a little sliver of like, it's easy to understand why he may have this perspective, because without humanity's surrender in Half-Life 1, I guess, or the, time before Half-Life 2, humanity very obviously could not fight off these aliens. So I did enjoy that kind of characterization of him in the first, 75%. Then at the end, it's like, okay, this guy, we got to stop this guy.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you there. And yeah, no, I think it is interesting. I think they get into, well, okay, let's just talk about the end of the game here. I think everything else I want to talk about relates to sort of how this game ends. So I'm curious on what your thoughts are.
So remind me, something bad is happening in that kind of factory that you go into. Something, one of those, a fate worse than death is happening in there, right? They're going to use people for some kind of, nefarious purpose. I don't remember exactly what's going on in that factory.
I couldn't tell you either. I think it's bad. If you might remember in the Citadel, so in the final part of the game, you do see these like skeletal figures. Sort of, they're inaccessible usually, or you can't interact with them. But those are what people are getting turned into. In addition to, the more heavy duty Combine soldiers. Those are, I don't believe, are human anymore. They are some sort of mutated, brainwashed soldier. And so I think that's the fate that's worse than death. And then obviously you're going into the Citadel at the end of the game because they've captured Eli, or they still have captured Eli. You did not get him back, but they take him to the Citadel and they're gonna slurp his brains out so that they can find out information about the Resistance. That's why he's so important, beyond being like Alex's dad, but he's like a crucial piece to the Resistance. Like he knows everything about them. So
yeah. So, and like that Citadel level has some of my favorite parts of the game in it. I like when you hop into like those little transporter pods and you get like a tour of the facility. I really liked that. It shows you like the sense of scale. Like this facility is so fucking big. And then you get to see all these like lines of production for like the Striders and countless numbers of these pods for people that are, it reminded me of the Matrix, how like when you saw the pods of all the people in there.
Yeah.
That was really cool. And then the where you get your supercharged gravity gun was my favorite section of the game.
Man, the blue gravity gun, the supercharged gravity gun, like just I distinctly remember they take away all your guns and I'm like, what's happening? Like this is the end of the game. I was like, this is it. And then they give you back the gravity. And it's capable of chucking your enemies. Like the satisfying moment where you realize when you point at an enemy and it doesn't go boop, like, no, you pull him towards you and then you can chuck him at another guy. Holy smoke. What a satisfying, amazing moment that is.
Yeah. You feel so badass in that. It's like the same levels of badass that I ever felt like playing Doom and stuff like that. Because you have a bunch of these combat sections where they surely designed this on purpose, where you have like you're going up an elevator and there's like this, long drop over the sides of the elevator, and there's all these enemies, and you're just grabbing dudes and throwing them off the edge down this like bottomless pit. And yeah, it's just so much fun to like see a group of dudes run at you. You grab one of them, you throw that dude back and take out the other two. It's so much fun. Like, I wanted to talk about that in the non-spoiler part for like how fun this game can be, but I didn't want to spoil that, because that is a moment when I came across it, like I hadn't been spoiled on that, and I was like, holy shit, this is the best. This is video games right here.
Yeah, I think just it's already the coolest gun. Like it is already like top tier, top 5 video game weapons or fictional weapons of all time. And then like getting to go all out with it is just immensely satisfying. And just like you feel like you have wave after wave after wave of enemy coming after you in the Citadel, and being able to take them all down just with the gravity gun. The weapon that you might have used to chop up some zombies or used to scrape by has now become the most powerful thing on that entire planet. is immensely satisfying. Yeah, no, it's one of the funnest parts, and that's what I was talking about earlier, like in the non-spoiler section. Like every climax is perfectly, like the gameplay and story is twisted into each other, and like the blue gravity gun is like the perfect example of that. Just the cherry on top.
Yeah, and there was that moment, I think it's right before you get the blue gravity gun, where the bad guy, Breen, that's his name, he takes it from you, and he's like, just kind of looks at it and he's like, what the fuck is this? All right, take this away. He gives it to one of his guards. But you do have like this moment where you're like, oh shit, like the gravity gun is, it's the gravity gun. You can really mess stuff up with this, but he doesn't know what it is. And he's just like, all right, take it away. I don't need this. And then you get it back. So it's like a real short little roller coaster between you being like, oh no, they took the gravity gun. And then I am the most powerful being on this planet now because I have this thing.
Yeah, no, the ending of the game, the gameplay on that, like and like I'll say it's not impossible to die there. Like they throw an appropriate amount of enemies at you. I think like there's enemies, and also the energy balls that you can grab and you can chuck around. It can come back and hit you. Like they hurt when they do. Yes, they do. And they disintegrate the Combine, and so when they come back and hit you, like it is not pleasant. And so I think it's just it is a great way to end the game, gameplay perspective wise.
That final boss fight was like interesting. It took me a few tries to figure out what I was supposed to do, to shoot the energy balls past the shield as the shield was rotating on like the teleporter or whatever. That took me a few tries, but it was overall still pretty fun. Yeah, real good. And then like the ending, when like you save the day, and like by this point I had forgotten how the game begins, because the game begins with Gordon being woken up by the elusive man. Not the elusive man, that's Mass Effect. The G-Man.
Yep.
I had in my notes here that the G-Man had to have been an inspiration for the elusive man. There is no way that they're not connected. I don't know. Have you played Mass Effect 2?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've played
Okay,
Mass
yeah.
Effect 2. I'm a big fan. So yeah, no, the like those two are definitely connected, and like I know the idea of like the man in black, like the puppeteer behind everything, has always, or not always existed. Like it has an origin somewhere, but G-Man's the first one that I always think of. Like that's always the number one in my mind is the G-Man. And
Hmm.
so yeah.
So, yeah, like right when you think you're going to have this, you know, celebration because you just stopped this plot, you basically get taken away from it right away. The G Man pulls you out and he's like, okay, good job, Gordon. I will be in contact with you. There are other people who request your services, basically. And like when that happened, I had forgotten that that's how the game began when the G Man wakes you up and puts you on the train because somebody has paid for Gordon Freeman's services. And that was really cool. And I didn't play Half-Life 1, and everything I know about it is just from, skimming the Wikipedia page.
Mhm.
But this is a cool idea. And so without spoiling future games, do the episodes or Half-Life Alyx is the G-Man part of that?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's a really cool thing. And like, so this is why I said, like, in the non-spoiler part, I can see why people would be clamoring for Half-Life 3 because like I was like, I want to know what this guy's deal is. Like I want to know what's going on. So I guess I need to play episode 1 and 2 if there's a little bit more exposition on that.
Yeah, there's a little bit more exposition on it. I think I would say honestly it's probably even more exposition that you get in the entirety of Half-Life 2. In those two episodes. The two episodes I
Okay.
would say probably each are probably about 3 to 5 hours long each.
Okay.
I think yeah, the second one might be a hair longer. Yeah, no, I would highly, if you enjoyed Half-Life 2, it's going to be, some new enemy types. It's mostly the same weapons, or might be exactly the same weapons, but it's still, I would say it's worthwhile, to go through. And yeah, no, they're fun games, and they kind of expand upon the lore a little bit. But yeah, no, I've kind of been holding off on. Obviously, we didn't talk about story in the spoiler section, but yeah, no, the G-Man is really interesting and confounds and perplexes the Half-Life community
Yeah.
to no end. But so I'm kind of curious, so the G-Man obviously has his spiel at the beginning, has his spiel at the end. Did you notice him at all as you were playing?
No, I completely forgot about, because I played the opening of this. Like I played the first couple hours and then I moved apartments, and like during that time, and I think I was doing a lot of podcast work and I just didn't play Half-Life for a while. So when I
Mhm.
picked it back up, I had forgotten about the G-Man at the beginning. So then when it
Yeah.
happened at the end, I was like, wait, what the oh, right. Okay. So I had forgotten. Is he throughout the game? Is there stuff that I missed?
So there's no, like, at least to my knowledge, there's no parts where he interacts in the game, but you can see him quite a bit. Like he is
Oh,
watching. Yeah. So if
you mean,
you can, if you don't want to replay the game, but you like, there's dozens of of articles.
YouTube supercuts and stuff
Yeah,
like that?
exactly.
Yeah.
That I
So
would
you mean
definitely.
like he's like you mean like you're going through and if you know where to look, you can like see him looking in a window or something like that?
100%. Yeah.
Damn, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. No, that's it's definitely like one of the I think one of the things that like wasn't like the biggest hook, but it was definitely there. Like the before I was on the internet reading wikis and on YouTube and stuff, I was like, I need to see him. I need to find every single instance of the G-Man. And some of them require some pretty precise timing to catch. But yeah, no, I would definitely recommend checking it out because he shows up quite a bit. and kind of adds to the mystique of the of the character.
Yeah, just looking at some like seeing if I can find some screenshots of him, lurking somewhere. That's pretty cool. And yeah, it definitely like so when you were playing, did you see this like yourself? Cuz that would have been like a really cool like holy shit, this guy's following me, like he's keeping tabs.
Yeah, there's one pretty obvious one, I would say, in like the third chapter when you first get in the airboat.
The fan boat. Yeah.
The fan boat,
Love it.
yes, yeah. He is on sort of like a distant a pier, and that was the first one I remember noticing, and so thus then like triggered the rest of them. Like I continued to like keep an eye out for him. And there's one particular one where you are, I believe you're in the buggy, you're driving around, and you're going from like resistance hub to resistance hub. And there's one where you can interact with a pair of binoculars and see across the way, and you see a G-Man interacting with a resistance member. They are chatting, and then he just walks out of your view and disappears. And yeah, so there's a lot of like little bits of G-Man lore out there that are really interesting.
Yeah, I think people who listen to the show or even just know me personally know that I'm not the most observant person. So not surprising that I didn't see it, but that is very cool. And cool for you that you saw that like naturally, because that you're right. Like if I did see that, it would have definitely made me a bit more like paranoid, I guess. That feeling that you're being watched. Even it's a video game, nothing matters, but like you would get that feeling that like man, this dude is following, watching, judging, like, and if you put all the pieces together, like, is this guy going to intervene at some point?
Right.
So that would have been cool.
Yeah, I think and I think that's where like you have the front lore, right? You have the Combine, you have the Zen aliens, you have humanity, you have the Resistance, but then there's this G-Man, and he talked about the people who have hired him, and he talks about you when you're working for him, and like all, but you don't understand how I'm like, well, Gordon Freeman, like, is it in his off time? Is he living in a mansion somewhere? Like who is doling out this cash for Gordon Freeman? And it's really interesting. And so like that's the stuff that like I get into that like people are really like they're hankering for it, man. They're out there.
So yeah, so that's the reason why like I should play the episodes, I guess, but that's the reason why, like, now if Half-Life 3 is released and I have a way to play it, that will be a game that I will, like, super look forward to. Number one, because Valve is just, when they decide to make a game, they crush it. They are incredible game developers. And it's kind of a shame that they have just decided, like, oh, we're really just not going to make games as like a full-time thing, and we'll just give you a little treat every now and then, like Half-Life Alyx or something like that. But if Half-Life 3 were to be released, like even just speaking outside of the memes and stuff like that, I would be interested in learning more about the G-Man, which would obviously be a part of it. And then I know with advanced technology, updated game engines and physics systems and stuff like that, I have no doubt that Half-Life 3 would be a ton of fun to play and like just a very well constructed game. I find it really hard to believe that like they would miss on it. They may be feeling like impossible expectations, but like Yeah, I would feel very confident in them as developers because I've only heard great things about Half-Life Alyx, and I'll never play it because it sounds too scary for me. But and also I don't have a VR headset or anything, but like I don't like scary stuff, and I've heard that game's terrifying, so I probably won't play it. But like Half-Life 3, I would feel very confident because I think Valve would just crush it and continue this G-Man, Gordon Freeman in and out of stasis type storyline they have going on here.
Yeah, so first step, I would highly recommend you play the episodes when you get some time. You don't have to do a whole episode on Tales from the Backlog about it, but you know, I would definitely recommend it.
Could do an episode 1 and 2 kind of combo episode of the show if I'm going to spend some time and have things to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you got stuff to say, I definitely would love to, you know, capitalize on that for sure, because those are also games that I enjoy a lot. But yeah, no, I think that as far as Valve goes, like they have stated and they've talked about in the production of Half-Life Alyx, I listened to interviews from the producers and the developers, and they've talked about like they did Alyx because they could do something special in the VR space. You know,
right.
if they're gonna make a Half-Life game, they could have made. I'm convinced they know exactly how Half-Life 3 is gonna go. The story is written somewhere. I just think
Makes sense.
they need the game to go with it. You know, I think that they could make an iteration off of Half-Life 2. They could update the textures, they could make a new engine, like they could do all of those things. And it would be an amazing shooter and people would love it. It'd get 9 out of 10s across the board. But they want something that's revolutionary. You know, they want to be the game that people are going to talk about 18 years later, like we're talking about Half-Life 2 today. You know, like that's their goal, that's the standard they're setting. And, you know, maybe, you know, they're never going to be on the precipice of the next great technology, and, you know, they're never going to quite, you know, like get there, and, you know, Valve will be owned by somebody else in 50 years, and then somebody will make a game about, you know, Half-Life 3, whatever it might be. But you know, like I think that's a legitimate possibility, is that it just never happens because they're never, you know, right there. But my current theory that I am holding to is I do hope that we get a Half-Life 3. I could see it coming out in the next 10 years and it being a VR compatible and computer compatible game. Like, I think that might be the next step, making it accessible, because I think Half-Life Alyx it's an amazing game. I loved getting to play it, and I'm happy that I got to play it, but it's still not a full game. You know, it's the closest I think VR has gotten so far to like a full game, but it's not a full game like I would say Half-Life 2 is. And so I think that's my current theory, Craft, is that they are going to go the extra step and figure out how to make a game that is compatible for mouse and keyboard and a VR headset, which is ridiculous, by the way. Like, modders cannot get Half-Life Alyx currently to work with mouse and keyboard.
You have a good point. Like, thinking of the Valve games that I've played, and then the things that have been in the zeitgeist a little bit, they are definitely a studio that seems like they would prefer to make one really amazing, really unique game every 10 years instead of just pumping out a new game every 2 years or whatever. Like they have enough money to fund all kinds of game ideas and develop. Like, Valve has all the money in the world, but they certainly seem like they really prioritize having, you know, a super unique thing come out every now and then, which is, yeah, you're probably right on with your assumption about Half-Life 3. If it were ever to happen, they're trying to figure out how they would make it stand out and not just be, you know, a modern first-person shooter with Half-Life, you know, branding, basically. They got to make it stand out somehow. And like I think you said too, like, if anyone's going to do it, Valve is the company to figure it out. They're always figuring this stuff out.
Yeah, no, at this point, it's been so long. I'm like, I don't know. I have no expectations. And I think that's where a lot of people are at. And so I think a lot of people would just like it to exist. For me personally, I have waited this long. I will continue to wait as long as they ask me to. My second backup theory is that I'm hoping that it drops with no publicity whatsoever. Is that one day I'm just going to open Steam and Half-Life 3 is going to be there.
You're going to wake up and you're going to have 1 million text messages from everybody who knows you. And they're going to be like, dude, check Steam right now. And you're going to be like, I'll get to it. And they'll be like, no, now. Check Steam now.
Do you know how many people would download that? I mean, like, the insane media, like, they don't have to do any advertising. Like, they don't, like, a trailer will not get people more hyped than just dropping it day one out of nowhere.
It's been self-advertising for the last, like, 15 years.
Maybe that's the gimmick. It's actually just gonna be Half-Life 3 in Half-Life 2's engine. It's just gonna be the greatest advertising gimmick of all time. That's what they're going for.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, good. All right, man. What do you say we wrap this up? This has been we're about 2 hours now of recording, 2 hours plus. Good discussion. This has been a good time.
Yeah, no, I've had a great time. I think I always enjoy evangelizing Half-Life 2 to anybody that will listen. And so, coming on, getting to talk about it's been a great time. So, yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm glad. I think I might have intrigued you a little bit more about the Half-Life 2 story. So, yeah, I'm glad we were able to do that in this spoiler section.
Well, and this will be the last thing I say. I think I told you this, but you would not believe how hard it was to find a guest for, as revered as this game is. I posed this game to at least 5 to 10 people, and you're the only one who was like, yes, Half-Life 2, I want to talk about that. Yeah. So I was like, I kind of bewildered by this is such a highly regarded game. You would have figured this would be one of the first ones people pick out of my list, but that was not the case. So I really appreciate you. And it turns out you're the perfect guest for this episode anyway, being that you have such a different history with the game, and you also know a lot more about the story and stuff than I do. So again, really appreciate you coming on. This has been a great conversation, and I can't wait to have you back on to talk about another game if you're up for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come back on sometime and chat it up. This has been a great time. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Dave.
Yeah, good times. Again, everybody listening, thank you for listening this far. And again, if you want to support the show, best things to do, again, subscribe, leave a rating and review if you enjoyed the episode. Join the Discord, come and chat with us. And last but not least, check out Super Bracket Bros. Great podcast, good times. Jay, thanks so much. Everybody else, see you next time for the next game that comes out of the backlog.